A story of how perfect we are, called The Gift of Fire. Long before humans began to populate the planet, there was an ages long fight between two groups of immortals, gods and titans. The titans were older, but the gods, led by Zeus, were more powerful. This is a story about one of two titan brothers, Prometheus, whose name means foresight, and Epimetheus, whose name means hindsight. They were great fighters who turned against the other titans and joined the gods in their ongoing war. And as a result, the gods ended up winning, and the other titans were punished for all of eternity. Prometheus and Epimetheus decided not to live on Mount Olympus with the gods, but instead stayed on Earth and visited often. The goddess Athena taught them about astronomy, mathematics, architecture, navigation, metalworking, and writing. And Zeus gave them the responsibility of creating and naming animals to fill the earth, with instruction to give each one of them not just a unique name, but a unique set of characteristics. Epimetheus was happy to get right to work, creating animals on the earth, air, and sea. He gave them claws, feathers, and fins. Prometheus, though, was more thoughtful. He began to sculpt with mud, imagining a creature, and as it evolved, it more and more resembled the gods. The creature had a strong core, and deft hands, and eyes that were inquisitive and expressive. Now, Athena thought that Prometheus's creature was viable, so she breathed life into it. She gave it a spirit. The thing is that Epimetheus was so fast that he had already given to his creatures all the godly characteristics, like claws and teeth and gills and wings. There was nothing left for Prometheus's creation. The creature didn't have any real physical power, but it looked like the gods, which annoyed Zeus to no end. So, he gave them a really short lifespan, figuring that if they knew their whole lives that they would die, they would have no choice but to worship the gods. So Zeus ordered Prometheus to teach the creatures how to offer sacrifices. The idea was that it would be a constant reminder that they owed their lives to the gods, and that whatever they would hunt or gather or cultivate, they would have to divide it. And the gods would get to choose the best parts. Prometheus, you can imagine, was disappointed and angry, feeling like his creatures should have more purpose than just worshiping those who were more powerful than them. So he taught his creatures how to trick the gods. After they'd hunted oh boy, I can't talk today. After they'd hunted one of Epimetheus's animals and butchered it, Prometheus helped them make two piles. One pile had lots of good meat to eat and fur for clothes. But he topped it with the grossest, least appetizing innards from the animal. Now, the other pile was a pile of gristle and bones, but he topped it with a layer of beautiful, perfectly marbled, succulent-looking meat. So you know what Zeus did. He came down and he chose the pile with the tastiest-looking meat on top and returned to Olympus only to find it camouflage for garbage. Zeus had been tricked, and he was so angry he wanted revenge. He knew how much Prometheus cared for his human creations. So to punish Prometheus, Zeus declared that humans would not have access to fire. That'll teach you to worship us properly, he said. So without bear claws, eagle eyes, or cheetah legs, humans really suffered. They were barely able to get food. And worse, they shivered without fire through the cold, dark nights. And they were only able to eat raw food, which was so much harder to digest. They couldn't thrive because they spent their days gathering and eating and their nights sleeping. So now Prometheus was angry. He couldn't stand to see his beloved creatures tormented and suffering. So one night, he climbed up the shadowy side of Mount Olympus and snuck into the shop of Hephaestus, the god of blacksmithing and fire. He snuck around all the tools that were being made for the gods, and he stole from the gigantic hearth a single spark of flame, which he hid inside a hollow stalk of fennel. Prometheus returned to Earth and gave the fire to humans as a gift and taught them everything that Athena had taught him. He taught them to harness fire to forge metal into tools and weapons. He also taught them how to build strong buildings and safe towns. He taught them about the stars so they could navigate their ships, so it didn't take long for them to move around the Earth and populate the whole planet. Of course, in the process of taking over the world, some humans used their power wisely and became kings and generals while enslaving others in various ways. Some became so powerful, so comfortable in their power that they questioned the power and even the authority of Zeus and the other gods. Some humans began to think that they were gods. Zeus, as you can imagine, became even angrier. Not only had Prometheus stolen from the gods and gone against the rules, he'd also destroyed the passivity and the subservience of his human creations. Zeus had to have revenge, so he captured Prometheus and chained him to a cliff in unbreakable chains and had a vulture peck and claw at the Titan, eating away his liver every single day, because each night Prometheus would be healed in the darkness so that he could be tortured in the same way, day after day. Nevertheless, Prometheus never regretted his rebellion. He never regretted caring for and protecting and teaching his creations. His name, after all, is foresight. He knew that humans would be capable of good and evil and everything in between. He also knew that his tenacity and dedication would inspire resilience in his creatures. Please rise now in body or in spirit for hymn number 1028 in the teal little low granite wall on UN Plaza in San Francisco, writing in my journal when a bearded 20-something skateboarder approached me and asked what I was writing. I don't remember what I was writing about exactly, but I remember that I told him what it was, and we had a really interesting and animated conversation about it before he went back to doing disco flips. And as soon as he rolled away, I began to write about the conversation. Not really about the experience, but about the ideas that we shared. And within a couple minutes, the skateboarder was back, demanding to know what I was writing about. Before he could even respond, he was yelling at me. "You better not be writing about me. My soul doesn't exist for you to steal." And he kept yelling this over and over again to stop stealing his soul as he rolled into the distance. Now, at first, I dismissed his behavior as paranoid schizophrenia, or hallucinogens, or both. I didn't give that event in UN Plaza any more thought for a while. But a few days later, I remembered visiting the Pennsylvania Amish country on a field trip when I was in 7th grade. Our teacher, Mr. Albano, told us to not take pictures of the Amish people because he said they believed that to have their picture taken was to lose a piece of their soul. Now, before moving here, I lived in Ohio surrounded by Amish people, and I've learned that's not exactly true, but that was how he presented it to us. And he said, if you take a picture of them from a distance without them knowing, you're stealing their soul. Now, honestly, for the longest time, I thought that was just an oddity, the beliefs of the Amish and the beliefs of this skateboarder who could have been Amish for all I knew. That was just an oddity of theology, a theology that I didn't believe in, but they believed in, so, well, I want to respect it as much as possible. But about the same time that I encountered the accusatory skateboarder, a friend of mine who was studying portraiture in oils asked me to pose for him. I thought he was bonkers, but he thought my dark curly hair and hooked nose looked like a centurion in a Renaissance portrait. So Steve posed me in a very dramatic kind of lighting, and I had to be like this and kind of looking at a certain angle, and the light was just right. He took a picture. And 2 weeks later, he showed me the end result alongside a photograph of the inspiration painting. And it was kind of uncanny. I really did look like the centurion. It was the nose, and it was the curly hair and the pose. And it was easily the best painting that he'd ever done. Then he offered me first dibs on buying the painting. $1,000. I was in seminary. I didn't have that kind of money, and he'd never sold anything for more than $100. So I thought, it'll come back to me someday. So I passed on his generous offer. And darn if that painting didn't sell on the night of the group show at his school. And immediately I regretted not buying it. Every time I thought about it hanging in some stranger's house, I just felt weird. It felt, I know it doesn't make any sense, but it felt like I was being watched, maybe even critiqued by this art patron and all the guests that would come to their home. I felt like a piece of me had been taken and passed around without my consent. Like my soul was stolen. And suddenly I understood the angry skateboarder. Now, my logical mind knows that I was being silly. I was just a model, like the model in the painting of the centurion, that painting that inspired the pose, with our similar hair and noses. Hair and noses like countless others of European descent. I know that Steve created that painting, that he breathed life into an idea by skillfully applying oil to canvas. But still. So I feel like that must be a common human experience. We tend to think of ourselves as being unique, like we created ourselves out of nothing, and that we should have exclusive rights to anything having to do with us. Like we can somehow control how others see us or experience us. But the truth is, whether we know them or not, our parents created us. Our parents breathed life into us. Our families formed our identities. Our communities had a big part in making us who we are. And we have no control over the effect that we have on others. or what they think about us based on their limited experience of us. No matter how much it may bother him that I do it, I still occasionally think about that skateboarder. And 20 years later, I'm standing here talking about him. But the common experience that we shared that day binds us together forever. It changed me. It was a mythological experience for me. And that's the power of mythology, right? It gives us the power to name and shape our common experiences. It's not a coincidence that so many traditions across the globe have really similar creation myths. God's making humans from clay and breathing life into them. Humans tricking our creators out of a sense of adventure or to assert our autonomy. Parent-like gods who love their creation so much that they'll sacrifice themselves in order to keep their creation safe. Ancestors whose wisdom and bravery made us who we still are today. Mythology is full of similar stories about cunning warriors and helpless victims, enslavement and liberation, patriotism, pettiness, heroism. Myths are made-up stories, but they're not just made-up stories. They exist to explain what was unexplainable to early humans. Natural phenomena like the changing of seasons, earthquakes, eclipses, human behaviors of valor and cowardice, and the myriad ways in which we treat each other abominably, even when we should have known better. Sometimes I think the Bible, which really is a collection of myths, should be called the anthology of people behaving badly. Because, when it comes to behaving badly, nothing much has changed in the last 3,000 years. But myths continue to be made and to evolve because they're expressions of essential truths about how we see ourselves and what it is that makes us who we are. They're expressions of human experiences and emotions as we interact with each other and the world, forming our individual and collective identities. Myths are expressions of our interdependence, reminders that none of us invented ourselves out of nothing. Something breathed life into us. Something is constantly changing us. The story of Prometheus is the story of the struggles of humanity. Feeling abandoned by the universe, alone and cold even when surrounded by others, the horror of a parental figure who turns out to be neglectful or abusive in their self-centeredness, and the tendency we have to see ourselves and our people as the good and innocent ones, and those others out there as the enemies who are bad. And of course, enemies can include malevolent gods, they can include tribes, they can include nations. It's so much easier to blame the other than it is to see our own complicity in our own circumstances. The story of Prometheus is just one expression of human life on a planet that is both hospitable and threatening. It may give us hideous insights we don't want about how vulnerable we really are. The path of life may lead us to places we don't want to go and may never be ready for. Winds may be cleansing, but they may also expose the little lies we tell ourselves about our interdependence. The stories we tell ourselves in order to feel like we can survive on our own. Last fall, I got an email from a guy whose mother, a dedicated patron of emerging artists, had bought that portrait of me 20 years ago. She had recently died, and per her wishes, he was trying to return all of the pieces to their creators. He couldn't read my friend Steve's artist signature at the bottom of the painting and had no documentation to go along with it. So he did a Google image search. And amazingly, I came up. Right? I had posted a picture of that on Facebook. And it showed up. And he contacted me. So I talked to Steve, and he wanted me to have the portrait. He'd already made his money from it. So that portrait now hangs in my living room. It's an homage to who I was 20 years ago. It feels less vain and more nostalgic now. It's kind of a reminder of everything I've learned as my hair has turned gray and moved south. It's a memento of a journey that has taught me that I'm not alone, that someone, maybe even many someones, care about me and might even sacrifice themselves for my well-being. It's a reminder that I would do the same. I've been hearing a lot lately about copyright in the internet age, when stories and images are so easily shared. Who has the right to control words and pictures that are the results of the complex interactions that make us who we are? Should the creator own the work, or should the subject own the work? If they both own it, how do they share that? The thing is that neither can exist without the other, so there really isn't any easy answer to that question. But I know this. Living in a world where people throughout time have looked like me and have had similar kinds of experiences, no one aspect of me is unique. And the things I have in common with others is what gives me the strength I need to make it through tough times. There really isn't a single aspect about me that is completely unique in the world. I may have a singular combination of traits formed by my birth and experiences, but there have been people who look like me and people who've survived similar losses, celebrating similar successes. More importantly, I wouldn't be who I am if it weren't for the input, positive and negative, of everyone I've encountered along the way, no matter how life was breathed into them. And that's the price of our interdependence as we each live out our mythic journeys. It's both humbling and empowering. Please rise now as you're willing and able, and remain standing through the end of the service. Let's sing together hymn number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. That's in the gray hymnal.
Gesture to your side when it's time to sing. Gesture to your side. Okay, but we're first.
I may speak with
These are the words of T.S. Eliot. What we call a beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We extinguish this house, but not its light. That we take with us out into the world, sharing with those we encounter on our journey. Let's form a circle, shall we, for our closing song? And if the person next to you is willing and able to take your hand, go ahead and do that.
I've muted Rev Denise' phone, and so we can unmute and visit with each other if you care to.
Okay, and turn off the recording, Mary?
It stopped.
Oh, okay. Mine says it's